All right, so for this tub surround, I really wanted to go into the basics and have something that everybody has available to them. If you live next to a Home Depot or a Lowe's somewhere, you're definitely gonna have these products, and that is regular cement board and a liquid waterproofing called Redgard. I don't typically go through this type of method, and I'll explain why as I'm putting this together. But it is a common method. It is something that's available to everybody. So first thing is you have to address the framing. If you're putting in grab bars, and you want to make sure that all of your framing is intact before you go start installing this. There are requirements for how much space in between studs are, and then obviously you want to make sure that your wall is flat. So let's get into it. All right, so if you're going to be putting shower doors in or even a shower rod that needs screws, it's a good idea to get some framing right at where the tub rim is. Or if this is a walk-in shower, this is really important because you want to have something you can anchor your doors into. So I usually just use a 2x6, basically flat way, so that you have plenty of area to be able to add some framing. And then I always recommend to have your cement board come outside of your tub area just a couple of inches. It's really problematic to have drywall meeting up against a tub. This is a very common area for drywall rot, mold to grow, and obviously water saturation. So I'm going to put another stud here just so I can have that cement board come out a little bit. Do the same thing on this side. All right, so this is all new framing. So this really isn't going to be an issue, but you just want to make sure that your studs are all in a line with one another. So use a straight edge and make sure that everything's going to be okay on that. This stud actually could just go in just slightly. Sometimes all it takes is just to move it a little bit, but just make sure that everything's flat. Same with the back wall, because the flatter the wall is, the easier it is going to be the tile. So just make sure that there isn't any movement. You know, you do have some wiggle room. I mean, if it's like an 1/8 inch or something like that, that's not really going to affect anything. It's anything that's like 1/4 inch and above, you really want to address it. And a lot of times in older construction, what I do is, if it's a 1/4 inch out, is I just sister on a new stud and then bring that out. And then on occasion, I plane down the stud with a power planer to be able to get it in line with one another. But normally just sistering on a stud or putting additional shims does the trick. But with new framing, you really shouldn't have a problem. But you want to make sure before you go putting the backer board up that everything's flat. All right, so when it comes to installing backer board, now this goes for any type of backer board. There's 3 different ways to really go about overcoming it. Now with cement board, you're really only going to have 2 options. Number 1 is just to literally set the cement board directly down over top of this flange, and that's going to end up creating a big gap between the board and the tub deck itself. Now, a cast iron tub like this, it's actually very nice because it's really not that, it doesn't raise up all that much. So you can certainly just run that cement board right on top of that and probably be good shape. The other alternative is to put a shim on here to overcome the tub flange and allow that board to go straight down onto the tub deck. That's the way I'm going to do it. Another reason I'm going to be shimming out all these walls is just primarily because when I framed the wall, I gave myself a little bit of room so I can get the tub in. So I actually have 60 3/4. So, you know, that backer board is not going to be out far enough to be able to overcome this tub flange. You don't want any type of bellow on that at the edge. So basically furring out all of these studs 1/2 inch or the 7/16 plywood is really the simplest way to go. And then you have a minimum. You're setting that cement board directly down over top of that tub. So let's go ahead and do this back wall, and then we'll address the side walls after that. Okay, so we're going to use our staple gun. Okay, so before we put the cement board down, now one thing about cement board, the recommendation is to have a little bit of a expansion and contraction joint at any corner and at the tub seam and then in between the sheets. They say about an 1/8 inch. It's a little excessive. So, take the manufacturer's recommendations, but I typically, as long as I get like a 1/16 or something like that, I'm usually pretty happy. But what I do like to do is use this Quad Max. This is basically the same stuff as like Go-Board sealant. It's a polyurethane sealant that thin set bonds to, and it's going to be something that's going to be waterproof. It gives a little bit of elasticity to it. It's not silicone. It's better than silicone. Silicone, unfortunately, nothing really bonds to silicone, but the liquid waterproofing is going to be fine to go over top of this. So I like to put that right on the tub deck and then set my board into it. But let's first get the cement board up there, make sure, because these little tub lips here on the edge here are probably going to keep that board up a little bit high. So let me check it right here. I guess that's right on there. Now we can just use the door rock screws every 8 to 10 inches. Okay, so to provide that little 1/8 inch gap, just put a screw right at the top. And we'll just set the board right on top of that. So cutting, simply just use a utility knife. In between these gaps, I just run some of this sealant. Okay, so when it comes to putting the tub's backer board on, now you could just literally on a cast iron tub like this, just butt this straight to the top of the tub deck and fill this joint. Now this tub, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit concaved here, and that was mainly because, my walls are not completely square and that I actually have more room in between the studs from the rough framing than the actual tub. So really the simplest way to go about this is just to put some shims up against the studs, and then this will come straight down onto the tub deck. That really is the simplest way. Now, if you have existing drywall that you're trying to meet up with, that makes that much more difficult, and most of the time, that's what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to go straight on top of the tub deck and then just fill in the tub gap. A cast iron tub obviously doesn't really have a whole lot of concaveness here, so it's really not a big deal to fill that in with the sealant, or you can use a membrane to go over top of it and fill in that joint. But when you get into the newer acrylic tubs, you're going to have a gap that could be about an 1.25 inches or so thick. So again, that's where being able to fur this out and then bring the backer board straight down is really the best way to go in my mind, and make sure that everything is nice and flat and straight to the tub deck. Okay, since I am furring this out, I am going to have to pull this out. On your plumbing, you want to make sure you Put some nail guards on this. Okay, so we'll put a bead of sealant right here. That squeezes nicely. Put a small piece on here. Now this is going to be a wainscoting I'll come across here, but at the very least, you really do want to have just a couple, like an inch of cement board against this tub, because this is definitely an area where water saturation can happen. So you're better off just to have a little sliver of cement board right here. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and waterproof this cement board. And keep in mind, all cement board, hardy backer, needs to be waterproof if you want a long-lasting shower, because it is actually pretty porous, believe it or not. So if water gets behind a tile, which it eventually will, the grout and tile itself is not 100% waterproof. And once water gets behind it, it'll absorb into the concrete board, cement board, and then start causing mold issues and all types of other problems. So you have to apply some kind of waterproofing over this kind of substrate, whether that's going to be a liquid or a sheet membrane. Now, liquid is pretty foolproof if you ask me. It just takes a little bit longer to get to the tiling process. So like a sheet membrane, like Schluter, I can pretty much thin set that layer of sheet membrane on here and then immediately get into tiling. Whereas a liquid waterproofing is going to take some time to actually set up, before you can go ahead and start setting tile. Now, we're going to be installing pretty much the most commonly used liquid membrane out there, especially for DIYers, and that is custom Redgard. This is really pretty much available at every single home store across America, and I think it's one of the main reasons that it's so popular. It's just available. You can just pick it up off the shelf. Now, I am almost 100% certain that every one of you are not adequately putting enough of this membrane on the actual wall to meet ANSI standards. So ANSI is the American National Standard Specifications. So this is a slew of tests that they put on waterproof companies to make sure that they meet the criteria for a long-lasting shower. So they do different stress tests. They do like a 48-hour test to see if it's waterproof. They have hydraulic pressure tests to make sure that it's able to handle any water coming up through the bottom of it. So it's really in the shear strength too. So that really is where having a thick layer of this is going to give the adequate shear strength for any kind of normal movement that you might have in your home. So these specifications are there to protect the homeowner, and if you're doing a commercial application, it's imperative. You don't want to be getting sued over improper applications. But the reason I say that I believe majority of you are not using the correct amount is because to do that in these standards over cement board, 1 gallon of this would do only 55 square feet. I know a lot of you probably just want to buy that $50 bucket and think that's all you're going to be able to have to spend to waterproof it. If you're doing that, I mean, you are getting some waterproof ability, but you're not getting a really thick layer that's going to be a long-lasting type of application. So 55 square feet. This regular tub surround, which is a 32 by 60 inch wide tub. We got 8-foot ceilings. That's 77 square feet. So you need a minimum of 2 gallons to properly do this, because you're going to do 2 coats in order to get the proper mill thickness to be able to meet those ANSI standards. So we're going to go through an application that a lot of you don't see with Redgard. A lot of you probably see the roller method. You need to get a very nice thick layer for each one of them doing. And what I'm going to be doing is troweling it on. That is going to give you the best bet of being able to do this. And one reason that things take such a long time with cement board is a lot of times you have to, you're supposed to address all the seams. So as you can see, I already pre-filled with a polyurethane sealant. Now, a traditional method would be just using an alkali resistant tape like this with thin set and then just seaming over everything. That has definitely been the way most people have done it. It just takes a long time because you have to wait for that thin set to completely dry before you can do the liquid membrane. So you basically lose, a whole day waiting for this to dry. What I'm going to show you is just using a membrane for these liquid waterproofings, and we're going to be able to basically embed this with the liquid waterproofing, and then we'll be able to get 1 coat of this all in one day, and then the following day get into the final coat, which would give us the adequate amount to meet those ANSI standards. Okay, so this membrane is just a very thin fleece, essentially. So this is like a glorified drywall tape, but it has that fiber mesh to it that's really going to bond it. So now I'll be able to do that on all of the seams and all of the corners. So let's pre-cut some of this so that we don't have to deal with this when we actually start applying the membrane. So we'll get it enough for these corners. Okay, so we're just going to apply this with a 6-inch knife, kind of like we would a drywall tape.
Right at the beginning.
So I'm just using a 12-inch knife here. And we're basically just gonna coat this whole thing. Now you can gauge this with that 3/16 inch trowel if you want. Get it on with this first. Yeah, so this will make sure that you get the right consistency. This is where that roller just is not going to do it. If you wanted to use that roller, that thing's going to take like 4 coats to get the right thickness. So this is a 3/16 inch trowel. So just coat it over so that the layer is even. And then you can smooth it out. So now that's the right thickness. Now we can just smooth it out. You can see there's a real nice thin layer all the way across. Okay, so that's what you want it to look like, having that much on that wall. No, there's just no way you're going to get that with that roller. Just not going to happen.
Hurts to breathe. How are you doing that? I don't understand.
All right, so that is ANSI standards here. You might think it's ridiculous, and maybe it is, but that's, you know, this is what other waterproofing materials are getting to. And it's a lot easier with other types of waterproofing. I find this stuff to really be unbelievably smelly. I mean, this stuff is like really like a strong chemical smell in here. And it's just so thin. I mean, it takes a lot, and it's a mess. So as you can see, it's just everywhere. So, I mean, don't really matter. I have everything taped off. I'm going to be able to take that off the next morning. But this is what it takes to get Redgard to their correct depth. Now, if you're doing it incorrectly, you know, I mean, are you getting some waterproofing? Absolutely. But it's not meeting what a lot of other ones. So my advice is just get a better product that's going to coat better and definitely not smell as bad. And you're just going to get a better job, because even look, I'm almost all the way through this whole 3.5 gallon bucket just on one tub surround. We're going to do the floor here next. The floor I'm not overly concerned about with waterproofing. It's more like a crack isolation membrane. So I can actually roll it on the floor, and I'm not really, you know, I'm going to still do the seams here on the corners just to waterproof. But, you know, if I don't get the thick layer on the floor, I'm not really overly concerned about it. I think it's important to do right against the bottom of the base and the floor and seam this. Now we are doing a wainscoting all the way across here, but if you're doing base trim, I would just try to keep the waterproofing below the baseboard. But this is like an area that just gives you a lot of extra insurance against any water damage if anything ever flowed or whatever. So we're gonna just go put that fabric right between the floor and the wall. And then from this point, if you want to do the ANSI standard, you're going to have to gauge it with the 3/16 notch trowel. So I'll give you the thickness you need for the floor for the first coat. So it's more, we'll let this dry. Now this does take forever to dry, so don't think you're going to be able to get this second coated in the first day. It's going to have to be tomorrow, and then the following day we'll be able to actually get into tiling. All right, I'll get this cleaned up. All right, second day. This is literally definitely 24 hours later. And there's actually, it's still a little bit wet in some of these corners. So that's the other thing about Redgard. It takes forever to dry. And we're actually in a fairly consistent state here. We're about 70 degrees. It's really not all that humid either. So, I mean, what would be nice is if we actually had some air coming through the home in some way. You know, having a window open probably could have helped out. But yeah, it's going to take a while for this stuff to dry. So that's another reason it's a lot better off going with the other products that you can get, you know, they're really quick dry and you can move on with your project. But now we have a nice, really thick layer here. We're going to do the second coat to meet those ANSI standards. And I had to buy another gallon. I basically went through that entire 3.5 gallon bucket here. Really, I'm more focused on this tub surround now, getting that coated. The floor came out well, and like I was mentioning, I'm just using this as a crack isolation membrane on the floor, so it's not necessarily going to be saturated with water. So let's go ahead and do the second coat here. First thing I'm going to do here though is just seal against this tub. So we're going to use some of this OSI sealant and just basically waterproof this right against the tub area. Okay, so we'll just apply it the same way with a 12-inch knife. Just go ahead and feather this out. Take a brush, especially on these corners. Brush might help out to get that nice and smooth in the corners and any lines that you have. Then I want to just show you why the ruler doesn't really work. So just apply this with a 3/4 inch nap roller. That's what they recommend. Okay, so that's rolled on there. Now look at this. That's not even close to the thickness. So you can see, trying to gauge it, you would literally have to do, if you're going to do the roller method, you're literally going to have to roll it on like 4 times to get the mill thickness that you need, because that's really not even, it's not even notching a trowel there at all. So that's why you need to trowel it on in order to get the proper thickness. Okay, so that's 4.5 gallons, and I didn't even get a full coat on the floor. Again, I'm not really that worried. The only other I would say about this is if this is your master bedroom, your master bathroom, I would definitely go with something different. I don't know how you could even sleep with the smell of this. It's so strong. It really can't be understated about how much of a chemical smell this is. So, you know, I would definitely go with something that's going to be less, I guess, toxic, you could say. I'm guessing it's toxic to smell this bad. But that gives you that full waterproofing that would be comparable to what Hydroban, Ardex 8+9, and a sheet membrane could get you. But to me, ultimately, it's not even really saving that much money. That was $280 for 4.5 gallons of Redgard. You know, Hydroban 3 gallons, probably about $330. 8+9, same thing, probably about $330. So you might be saving yourself $50. But you know, I would have been done yesterday because I would have been able to get the second coat on like literally 2 hours after I applied it, and I could actually be tiling today. So this is going to cost you time, even if it is readily available, but that's if you're doing it correctly. I mean, if you're just applying one little coat on the cement board, it's better than nothing, but you're not doing it to, you know, efficient standards. And if you're gonna spend this kind of money, you might as well get something that's gonna really be worthwhile. So hopefully some of these tips have helped you out. Leave a comment down below, let me know your experience with Redgard and if you would use it again. We'll just cut out a piece. Are you on?
Yeah.
All right. I'll just cut out a piece of this membrane so you can see how thick this is. So that's why you need to trial it. I would say this is just as thick as a Schluter membrane. So that's what you're trying to get to, and you're not going to get that with a ruler.